Hello, everyone. This is another Black Conservative. I am Ryan Bowling. Thank you all for joining me once again. So, I don't know if any of you guys that are watching this are familiar with this individual, but John Mellencamp, who is an 80s icon, 80s pop singer icon, made this crazy assertion in an interview with Bill Myers, I believe that's how he pronounces his last name, that only 1 to 2% of blacks in America are better off than they were 200 years ago during slavery. That's right. He made this crazy assertion that only 1 to 2% of blacks in America today are any better off than slaves were over 200 years ago when they were picking cotton in the fields. Now, right off the bat, that is the craziest assertion that one could ever come up with. But I'm going to read through this article. We're going to analyze what information is in this article from Breitbart News. I'm going to analyze this and break it down and give you my commentary on this, because in order for you to be able to understand his argument, you got to be able to understand where he's coming from. So let's get right into this. You cannot make some of this stuff up, but this is an assertion. But let's see what his argument is. Now, mind you, this article is a short article. It doesn't give us the entire interview, so if you want to see the interview, you have to watch it even on cable. And I'll talk about that later on at the end of this article. But this is a very small article. There's only bits and pieces of it in it. So I'm going to only analyze and give my opinions on the information that I have before me. So let's just go right into this. 80s rock singer John Mellencamp says that nearly all blacks in America today are no better off than they were during slavery. Now, this is how the article starts off. But let me before I go any further, I just want to say about Mr. Mellencamp, I am familiar with his music. Okay, I am familiar with his music. I'm familiar with a lot of 80s music, 70s and 80s music, 80s in particular. I love the 80s. I am a 80s child. I love the 80s, period. All kinds of music came out, and I loved it, okay? But I was not particularly a fan of John Mellencamp's music, okay? I'm not saying that because he made this absurd statement here. I'm just saying I just never was a real big fan of his, okay? I just really wasn't. The style just wasn't something I liked. But I was very much into pop music, okay? I loved new wave pop music, okay? I loved all those groups that came out of Europe at the time, in Great Britain and Scotland. So I love them groups. But that's another story, and I digress. I'm not going to get into the details of that. It's just that John Mellencamp was not one of my favorites. That's all. Okay, let's go on. Appearing on Bill Myers' Club Random podcast, the Jack and Diane singer made the outrageous claim that only 1 or 2% of black people in America have it any better than the slaves did 200 years ago. Now, that's a weird assertion, because let me say this right here. Let me make a comment right here. Assuming that he made this statement, which this artist is going to say he did, there's 1 or 2% of black people in America. Now, America is composed of over 300 million people. Blacks make up 13% of that 300 million. So that's about 40 to 42 million, okay? So out of the 300 something odd million people in America, blacks only make up 13% of that 300 million, which would be 40 to maybe 42 million, give or take. Now, 1 to 2% of that, what would that be? 1 to 2% of blacks would be what? Is that a real big number? No, it's not a big number. In fact, 1% of 40 million would be 420,000. So 1% of 40 million, you basically saying only 420,000 blacks are any better off than the slaves were 200 years ago. Where does he get these numbers from? I have no clue. But that argument is weird. But let's go on and read further what his argument is based on. Does he have any factual data to validate that? You guys are going to be shocked at what he says. He says, fortunately, Meyer didn't sit idly by and let the white rock singer make such a ridiculous proclamation without a challenge. And I believe Bill Myers he's liberal anyway, but he's not a radical or so what I can understand. one of these radical nutbag liberals. He's not one of these people that just have no sense whatsoever. They just say dumb stuff. He doesn't seem to be that kind of person, at least at this time. Now, I don't know the history of Bill Maher. All I know is that he is liberal, but I don't know his history per se in terms of in any extended way. All I know is that he's liberal. But at this point, he's not sitting by idly and letting John Mellencamp make such a bold and absurd a crazy statement. I mean, really, dude? Come on. No, watch this. Let's listen to this. It says, while addressing the issue, Mellencamp claimed he wrote a song he never produced, blasting sports as another form of slavery. I find that interesting because wasn't it the football player Colin Kaepernick that made an actual, what was it, a Netflix series that came out? I can't remember the name of the Netflix series. I actually tried to watch a few minutes of it just to see what it was about. And it was disgusting. I couldn't sit. It was just so cringeworthy. I couldn't sit through it. But he was another celebrity that basically said that, you know, sports is nothing more, and football in particular, rather, was another form of slavery. And I find that interesting if football was another form of slavery, because if you compare slavery and the way slavery was enacted and initiated and, you know, how contracts are done in football and in sports, is there any really comparison? Think of some comparison. Okay, let's look at how slaves in America became slaves. How did slaves in America become slaves? Did they become slaves by white people going in there and just forcefully taking black people off their continent? No. Blacks or Africans at that time became slaves when the black chieftains, the African leaders, sold their slaves to Europeans in America, and that's how they became slaves. It was no force. It wasn't whites coming there and taking and forcefully snatching blacks off of their native land by force. Now, let's compare that concept to making a contract in football or baseball or any sports. Is there any comparison there? No, there isn't any forced selling of anyone in a sports contract. The person that wants that sports contract, whether it's in football or baseball, or whatever, specifically talking about black people, okay, it's voluntary. Even though the black chieftains sold their slaves to the Europeans, it was against the will of the Africans who were slaves of the black chieftains. They had no choice. It wasn't like they said, well, you know what? Could we become a slave of this European person? Could we become slave? I would like to become one of their slaves. They didn't have a choice in the matter. Sports, you have a choice in the matter. So there is no comparison of sports being like it was instead. There's no comparison, boo-boo. Slavery was by force. Okay, the black chieftains took their slaves by force and sold them to the Europeans. There was no choice in that. With sports, when it comes to making contracts, it's a choice. It's not all about in making these contracts. And I'm only giving you guys what little I know, because I'm not no sports manager at all. Okay. My son is majoring in sports management, but I didn't do that. Okay. But when it comes down to making contracts in any form of sports, and I'm speaking particularly for black people here, okay, black people who want to become a football player or a baseball player, whatever, of course that organization is going to be looking out for themselves. That's why you need lawyers and accountants and so forth, because they're going to be looking out for themselves. They want to make the most on their investment. So they're going to be looking out for themselves. So any amount of money that they give this prospective sports figure, they're going to have to adhere to certain conditions in that contract that would meet to the standards of the people that's making the contract, to say, okay, if you're not going to meet these standards, we're not going to give you this money. That's just the way it is, because you're messing up our name, you're messing up our money. You got to adhere to the rules and regulations, like no going out to strip clubs and all this kind of stuff, or no drinking and driving. I'm just making some stuff up, but you get my point. Certain things you just can't do when you make this. That's why it's called a contract. But that's not slavery. We're about to give you guys hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars over a particular period of time. We want to make sure that our investment is a good investment, that you don't mess up the money that we invested in you. How is that comparable to slavery? I could go on with that, but that's just the dumbest thing in the world. Colin Kaepernick is an idiot, and John Mellencamp is falling in the realm of idiocy by making such a statement. So I had to blast this particular statement right here when it says, I had to blast this statement right here when the article says that Mellencamp claimed he wrote a song he never produced, blasting sports as another form of slavery. And listen to what he has to say. I wrote a song that I never recorded because I thought it was wrong, but it was called, quote, "From the effing cotton fields to the playing fields." Oh, and by the way, you guys, if you hear some noise in the background, I haven't learned how to edit it out at this point, but if you hear some noise in the background, that is the planes like the Blue Angels and so forth flying overhead and practicing for Labor Day this coming Monday. So just bypass that. I kind of like those planes, though. That's just so cool. But anyway, he says, but it was called, quote, "From the effing cotton fields to the playing fields." Now, he says, my point is that, yes, so what? Us as white people love to have black people entertain us, Mellencamp told Meyer. Okay, let's look at this. Let's analyze this. He says, the title of the record was "From the effing cotton fields to the playing fields." Now, honestly, I don't know when he wrote this. I don't know if he wrote it during the 80s or 90s or just recently or whatever. I have no clue of why he wrote of when he wrote this, okay? But he said, I never recorded it. He wrote the song, but he never recorded it. And it was titled "From the effing cotton fields to the playing fields." He says, my point is that, yes, so what? Us as white people love to have black people entertain us, Mellencamp told Meyer. The title of the song, "From the effing cotton fields to the playing fields," is that supposed to be a form of slavery? Or is he trying to say, you guys are still in the field, okay? You guys come from the cotton fields to the playing fields. In other words, it's the same thing in his argument. Now, I don't need to go into the details of whether or not it's the same thing, because anyone with any sense knows that the effing cotton fields and the playing fields, whether it's football or baseball or whatever, is not the same thing, boo-boo. Okay? In sports, the sports figure has a choice when it comes to signing the contract. Even if they're drafted or whatever, they get drafted or whatever, and some agency says, I like you, I want you, you can turn it down. From what I understand, they can turn down the contract. They can say, I don't want to be a part of that team. I don't want to be a part of that team. You can't force them. So since you can't force them, there is no comparison to the effing cotton fields and the playing fields. Just on that, I reiterated that because just on that basis, there is no comparison. But in addition to that, we could get into the payment and so forth. Look, man, this is just silly. There is no comparison, bro. It don't make sense. Then he makes his point is, my point is that, yes, so what? Us as white people love to have black people entertain us, Mellencamp told Meyer. Now, he's referring back to many decades ago, particularly in the early 1900s, when a significant number of black people were limited in their roles. And that's true. Hollywood was super racist back then. They only considered blacks for certain roles. They weren't mostly given prominent roles and so forth. And that's why a lot of black actors and actresses and producers and so forth created their own, organizations and so forth to make their own kind of movies, to present black people in prestigious positions and elevated positions and intellectual positions, because a lot of Hollywood was presenting them as just a black mammy or a buck-eyed guy walking around looking like he didn't know where he was at. That was common in Hollywood back then. But those movies and those shows, they were funny and they were entertaining to a lot of white people. So this is what Mellencamp is referring to. He says, white people love to have black people entertain us, Mellencamp told Meyer. The problem with that argument, though, is that there are a lot of white people that entertain white people. So could we, okay, any group of people, okay, yeah, white people love to have black people entertain them, but I'm pretty sure that white people love to have other white people entertain them as well. Then and now. Okay, I mean, the argument, black, and here's what I believe Mellencamp got this statement from, because I believe Mellencamp means well with his statement. I believe he means well. I believe he's sincere, but I believe he's going off of the concept of white guilt, which I believe a lot of these white liberals are. They're just going off the concept of white guilt, and they really believe that they're doing black people a justice. They really think that they're doing something good for black people, but in reality, they're not. They're only keeping, the way I see it, they're only keeping black people disenfranchised intellectually. They're only keeping black people with this mindset that they're still victims like they were during slavery days, which in turn, on a political level, keeps blacks voting for the Democrats. You know I'm going to go there, okay? A lot of this stuff goes all the way back to politics, and it is political. All this racist stuff, all this racial stuff always happens when it comes time for elections. When is people going to start, black people as a whole, hopefully they're seeing this, but when are black people in America as a whole going to see the pattern? Every 4 years or so, is when it comes time to campaigning, it's always about race. And the Republicans have to always be, and conservatives have to always be on the defensive about it, because it's always about race. The left always mentions race. Why? Because they know that history has shown that it works. Prayerfully, black people in America will wake up and say, wait a minute, stop, bro, I'm not a victim. It's interesting to me when you tell people and try to make black people understand that this is a victim mentality, they get mad at you and say that you are the coon. They say that you are the racist one. They say that you are the one that need to wake up N-I-G-G-A call, like Charlemagne the God told Larry Elder on his show. Forget everything Larry Elder said. You need that N-I-G-G-A card to wake you up. Really? Bro, you're the one with the victim mindset. You're the one that feel that the only way you can be successful is for somebody else outside of you to help you. It's interesting. That is not the way black people were in early post-Civil War history. They were not that way. They were not these kind of people that just needed the government to do everything for them. They wanted to be free from the government, since the government at the time was the problem. Boo-boo. Know your history. The government at the time was the problem. So they wanted to be free from that. And also over 90% of blacks during that time, during post-Civil War, voted Republican. You want to know why? Because they felt at that time, in terms of Republicans at that time, that the Republicans were the ones that set them free. After all, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Now, we can argue all day about what his motives were. It don't matter. He was a Republican. It was through him that he signed the proclamation of what was it? I forget what it was. You know what I'm talking about. But he signed the bill, and blacks were set free. Nobody else did it. Nobody else is going to do it. Abraham Lincoln did it. We can get all in it all day. But the point is that blacks at that time were trying to work to be independent from the government. Okay, they were trying to be into Emancipation Proclamation. That's what it is. They were trying to be independent from the government. Okay, the Democrats was teaching dependency upon government. But that's another story. I ain't gonna go into the detail of that. You get the point. Blacks at the time did not have a victim mentality when they had every reason to have a victim mentality. A victim is someone who does not have control over themselves. They are at the whims of some force outside of them that's stronger than them, that's keeping them bound. When blacks were freed from physical slavery at the time, they wanted to be free intellectually and economically. So they fought to be independent from that whole idea of slavery. Now it's the reverse. And yet people like John Mellencamp, okay, who means well, right, is going after the concept of white guilt, I believe, okay? A lot of these white liberals are going after the concept of white guilt. They feel guilty that their ancestors, which really, you really don't know whether or not they're your ancestors. Just because they're white don't mean they're your ancestors. Really silly, man. And they're going after the concept of white guilt. Well, I feel really guilty. I'm successful, and other black people are not successful. So let me just sit up here and say, well, we white people, we white people, we love to have black people entertain us, but white people love to have anybody entertain them. Black people love to have anybody entertain if they're honest with themselves. If a significant number of black people are honest with themselves, they know that they love black comedians and black actors and entertainers as well as white comedians and white entertainers. Particularly in the 70s and 80s, particularly in the 80s. I mean, a significant number of black people went to go see people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone. Oh, we flocked to see these kind of heroes. Oh, we did. We flocked to see them. Okay. No. It's this right here is just playing off of emotions. And it all leans back to the whole idea of a political worldview. This kind of talk from people like Mellencamp keeps blacks thinking that they're victims. I don't want to vote for it. I don't want to vote for this particular party. That's what it's all about. Let's go on. I could go on and on with this, man, but this is just silly. It says, but Meyer disagreed and said that, quote, a playing field is far better than a cotton field. Yes, indeed. I would say that the playing fields are a lot better than the cotton fields. That's what I would say about that. Maybe I'm crazy, John, but it seems like making no money as a slave picking cotton, it was not as good as playing left field for the Yankees, Meyer said. Absolutely. Silliest thing in the world. Mellencamp followed with the. Now, here's the part that gets me right here. Watch this. Mellencamp followed with the absurd assertion, yes, it was absurd, that only 2% of blacks are better off today than they were as slaves 200 years ago. And he says, this is what he says, no doubt there is 1 to 2% of black people in America who have a better life, the small town singer exclaimed. No doubt there is 1 to 2% of black people in America who have a better life. Let's just look at this, right? Let's analyze this part before I even go any further. I will argue this, Mr. Mellencamp, who means well, I'm going to assume. The very poorest people in America, black people in America today. When I say the very poorest, I'm not talking about those who are supposedly homeless. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about those who may have minimum wage jobs, or even might be on welfare, are far better off than the slaves were. Let's just take those who are getting welfare benefits and compare those blacks today who are getting welfare benefits to the slaves in slavery time. The black people today who are getting welfare benefits are much better off than the slaves were during that time. You say, how is that? Come on, man. Subsidized housing. Yes, when you compare the housing to the slaves, yes, the slaves received housing back in slavery days, but come on now, small little log cabins. When you look at a lot of these subsidized housing units in America today that are given to black people, a lot of these units are nice units. I know. You want to know why I know? Because I've been in them. I was home welfare at least once. So I know about the system, Bobo, boo-boo. I know about it. So I don't want to hear nobody say, you don't know. I know from personal experience. Now compare the housing units today to the log cabins over 200-something years ago where slaves was in. And then and think about this assertion that he said, no doubt there's 1 or 2 people, black people in America who have a better life. I mean, what are you even talking about? Every black person who's not walking the streets and homeless, whether they're working or on welfare, is better off than they were back then, bro. I mean, come on, man. Even those who are getting subsidized housing and food stamps are better off. Because even with the food stamps, they weren't getting any food stamps. The slaves weren't getting any food stamps or anything like that. I mean, they were receiving, the slave master was their food stamp, so to speak. But, you know, people who are on welfare today, they get food stamps, they can spend it on whatever they want. The slaves back in those days, in terms of food, they have to spend on food. But the slaves back in those days, they didn't have no choice of what they was going to eat. They had to eat what the master gave them. They couldn't say to the master, you know, master, boss, I want some steak today, boss. I want some ribs today, boss. They couldn't say that. They had no choice as to what the slave master gave them to eat. Yes, the slave master took care of them, but he gave them what he wanted to give them. Okay? Today, blacks who are on welfare, you know, no offense, okay, and you get food stamps, which is on a card now, you can buy whatever you want, whatever food you want to buy. You can buy whatever food you want to buy. So even people who are on welfare today, black people on welfare today, are still better off than the slaves were. So get your numbers right, Mellencamp. I could go on and on about this, man. The food stamps you get on your card, the housing you get is better. Come on, man. And medical, they do all that. I mean, come on. Anyway, let's go on. Meyer was shocked by the radical left singer's claim and replied, oh, stop. That's what you think, 1% to 2%? Okay, let's say, now this is the part got me, watch it. This is what he said. Watch it. Okay, let's say 10%. I'm just pulling the number out of my ASS, Mellencamp admitted. So in other words, he's lying. Now it's 10%. Well, why would you make up a lie, bro? Why would you lie? Just say the truth. So he just made that up, 1% or 2%. Why would you tell that lie? But even this, when he says, okay, let's say 10%, where is he getting these numbers from? Where is he getting this information from? It's people like this, black and white, but mainly white, that talk like this, that aggravates me, because I guess I'm supposed to feel some kind of way. Oh, I really think you love me and you care. Even if he may be sincere, I'm supposed to, as a black person, I'm supposed to really think you really love me and care. You just, man, your numbers are messed up. First, you said 1% to 2%. And now you admit, you saying, okay, let's say 10%. So you're making up numbers. Meyer joked that Mellencamp's numbers, quote, belong in his ASS, and added, quote, I'm telling you, that's just not true. And Myers is absolutely right. Article goes on to say, Myers is right, of course. Indeed, while blacks have reached the middle class at a lower rate than whites, it isn't a terribly big gap. Now, the article goes on to talk about how the middle class blacks and so forth haven't reached the same level of whites in terms of the middle class. But what I'm arguing, whether or not, I'm not even arguing whether or not blacks have reached the middle class or not. I'm refuting the argument that John Mellencamp said that only 1% to 2% of blacks today in America are better off than they were in slavery over 200 years ago. I use the welfare people, the people that are on welfare in the black community. They're still better off than the slaves are. So that's my argument. Mellencamp's argument can be refuted based on the argument I just gave. But anyway, let's go on. According to Pew Research, about half of all racial groups are in the middle class in America, with 47% of blacks and Asians having achieved middle class status. So there you go, some numbers right there. In comparison, 49% of Hispanics and 52% of whites has also reached that economic strata. And that is true. Blacks, now there are more blacks in the middle class now than there ever was. Okay, they may have reached it slower for various reasons, but they have reached it. So that's more than 1% to 2%, Mr. Mellencamp. The article goes on to say, with nearly half of America's blacks living in the same economic conditions as almost the same percentage of whites, Mellencamp's claim that only 2% of blacks are better off than slaves seems just a bit suspect. The writer's article is being moderate, of course. If we take Mellencamp's blather seriously, for instance, that would mean that half of America's white people live no better than slaves either. So you can watch the exchange at about the 29-minute mark. So this is the John Mellencamp Club Random with Bill Myers post. But that's the end of that article right there. Yeah, I wanted to analyze that because as sincere, oh man, this video went longer than normal too. As sincere as Mr. Mellencamp and a lot of white liberals may be, okay, as sincere as they may be, and I know I'm kind of harsh with this, but as sincere as they may be, a lot of these numbers and these assertions are inaccurate. Not only factual, but just experiential. Okay? Blacks, whether they are on welfare or whether they are working, are much better off today than they were over 200 years ago in the cotton fields, bro. Stop it. Just stop it. Now, I've heard people say this, well, you know what? You conservatives always pick something to do this. Look, man, I don't get paid for this. I only have 47 subscribers. I got to get 1,000 subscribers, and I don't have 4,000 watch hours. So I don't get paid for this. So this whole idea of capitalizing off of something is foolish to me. What am I capitalizing off of? I ain't getting paid for this. I do this because it's of entertainment purpose, but I also do it because I want to inform people and open people's eyes to what I believe to be is true. There's always two sides to the story, and if you only being inundated by liberal worldviews on the mainstream media, you're going to get the wrong. You're going to get a one-sided part of the history. Okay, you're going to get only one side, and I think that's inaccurate, and in a lot of ways, I think it's wrong. And to sum this video up, in a lot of ways, if not the only way, I think a lot of this stuff is political to keep blacks voting Democrat. Black people, wake up. Wake up, man. Wake up. Don't let these people make you feel like that don't let these progressive Democrats and these liberal celebrities make you feel like you need the government for every single thing. Let me say this and sum this video up because I could actually create another video on this. I am thoroughly convinced that part of the reason why so many blacks fall into the same rut every 4 years and vote overwhelmingly for Democrats is because to some extent they have been conditioned to be intellectually and physically lazy. Because the Republicans, or the good Republicans, I say the good Republicans and good conservatives, those who are true Republicans, okay, not the rhinos, push independence and self-assertion. And I believe that the Democrats and liberals have conditioned and brainwashed blacks to be intellectually and physically lazy. So that's one of the reasons why a significant number of black people do not want to vote Republican, because they know they're going to have to get their end up and do something. They don't want to do something. They would rather have the government give them what they want every 4 years or whatever. Give me my housing, and I don't need to do anything. I see this all the time where I work downtown. Same people. Young lady comes to me all the time complaining, I'm getting so tired of seeing the same people down there. She's one of the ones out there. She's on welfare, I'm pretty sure. But she comes down all the time complaining about seeing the same people, and among other things. And I said, well I'm thinking, well, stop coming down here. If you get tired of seeing the same people that don't want to do nothing with their life, stop coming down here. But you get my point. Point is, people like that have been conditioned, in my opinion, to be intellectually and physically lazy by the Democratic Party and by liberals in general. And when I say liberals, I mean liberals in power. Okay? They've been conditioned to be that way. That's why when it comes time to vote, that's one of the reasons why when it comes time to vote, they automatically vote Democrat, because they don't want to vote for somebody that's going to make them get up and work. They don't want to vote for somebody that's going to make them get up and say, hey, you need to read and educate yourself. They don't want that. They want their handouts. Those kind of people you can't do nothing with. And I'm not even trying to do anything for those type of people. I give the information that I give, and if they don't receive it, God bless you. I'm going to talk to people whose minds are receptive. Because I'm not going to spend all this time and all my time arguing and debating with people who simply want to be intellectually and physically lazy. It ain't happening. Not with me. Homie, don't play that. Okay? But that's what I had to say about this. John Mellencamp's assertion is bizarre, crazy, and ignorant. Okay, that's what I had to say about that. What do you guys think about his assertion here? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel. God bless you all. See you again.